Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a closer look at something pretty fascinating. The bacteria living up there in space with our astronauts.
Right. We've got some interesting sources lined up. Stuff from online discussions, Reddit threads talking about space station cleanliness.
Uh-huh. And astronaut health, plus some really solid scientific articles on microbes on the ISS. And now the Tiangong station, too.
And even how our own bodies, our microbiomes, change in space.
Exactly. So our mission today really is to figure out what's actually going on with these space microbes. What's real, what's maybe a bit hyped up.
And why it matters. Why this research is so crucial for future space travel.
Okay, let's jump right in. How clean, or maybe how not clean, are these space stations? There was that study comparing the ISS to a gem.
Yeah, that got some attention. They found things like Staphylococcus, which was the most common, about 26%, then Pantoa at 23%, Bacillus around 11%.
Names most people probably don't recognize, but the point was it's similar bacteria to what we find down here.
Right. Pretty much. It just shows that even in a place like the ISS, you get this baseline microbial life. It did kick off a lot of talk online, though.
I saw that, like the Reddit comment mentioning the famous Canadian astronaut guy.
Chris Hadfield, yeah. He and others on that thread made a good point. This idea that astronaut immune systems get totally wrecked by these bugs, probably overstated.
Right. And someone else pointed out how incredibly fit astronauts are. Their training, their health monitoring.
Exactly. They're not exactly couch potatoes going up there. It's a very controlled situation before and during the mission. Hardly a recipe for disaster.
And the ISS design itself, it actually learned from past experiences, didn't it? From Mir.
Oh, absolutely. Mir had its share of, let's say, learning opportunities, cooling issues, fire safety, and yes, definitely cleaning. Those lessons were baked into the ISS?
Because the ISS project kind of grew out of the Shuttle Mir program.
It did. NASA definitely took notes from that whole experience.
But cleaning in space, it's totally different, isn't it?
Yeah.
No gravity pulling crumbs down.
Precisely. People on Reddit were talking about that. Floating crumbs, little drops of liquid, they just stick to everything.
So astronauts are basically wiping down walls, ceilings, everything all the time.
Pretty much constantly. Plus, they rely heavily on ventilation systems, filters, dehumidifiers, trying to manage the air quality.
Okay, so maybe similar bacteria counts to a gym, but the crew is working hard to manage it. Which brings us to the next obvious question. Are these space germs actually dangerous? We saw that Reddit comment worried about multi-resistant Staph aureus, like you see in hospitals.
Yeah.
That sounds concerning, especially in space.
It's a valid point and something scientists are definitely watching, but, our bodies have defenses.
Like another commenter said, we get staph infections from cuts all the time down here.
Right. And usually if you're healthy, keep things clean, your body fights it off. Staphylococcus lives on our skin normally. That's why basic hygiene is key.
So it's not like there's some kind of super bug just waiting to pounce.
Well, based on what we know now from analyzing bacteria on the ISS, they don't seem inherently more dangerous than the ones on Earth. But that's not the whole story. We also need to think about our own microbes.
The microbiome. All those trillions of bacteria and fungi living inside us. What happens to them up there?
That's a huge area of research right now. Space hits the body with a lot. Microgravity, radiation, different food, stress.
All that can mess with our internal ecosystem.
It really can. It can change which microbes are there and, crucially, what those microbes are doing, their metabolism, their function.
And there were studies showing this, right? I think Taroni and others found changes.
Yes. Several studies have reported shifts, changes in the types of microbes, changes in their activity. Some signs point towards maybe increased antibiotic resistance or potential for causing illness in that environment.
But didn't the NASA twin study find something different with Scott Kelly?
That's true. The twin study, which was incredibly detailed, didn't report significant microbiome changes. So, yeah, the picture is still coming into focus. It's complex.
Definitely complex. But one thing that jumped out was the idea that the microbiome itself might adapt to space, especially the radiation.
That's a fascinating angle. The worry is if they adapt, they might become tougher, more resistant to antibiotics, UV light, heat, dryness, you name it.
So space isn't just a place they exist, it actively changes them.
It seems like it. It could be selecting for hardier microbes, and that's a big deal for long missions. It raises this question, are the astronauts adapting, or are their microbes adapting faster?
A kind of microbial arms race.
Potentially. If the microbes adapt more readily, that could increase infection risk, maybe with bugs that are harder to treat.
And I saw something about even the radio waves from the ISS possibly playing a role, making microbes resistant.
Yeah, that was an interesting finding. It shows how many factors might be involved.
Yeah.
And these long-term disruptions to the microbiome, they could potentially link into other space health issues too, like bone density changes, muscle loss. It's all interconnected.
It makes you think about just how adaptable life is.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads us to extremophiles, doesn't it?
Exactly. Extremophiles. These are the organisms that love the nasty places on Earth. High radiation, vacuum, crazy temperatures, intense pressure.
Conditions kind of like space itself.
Precisely. Studying them tells us how life can cope with those extremes. It gives us clues about what life might look like elsewhere, maybe on icy moons or Mars.
They have amazing tricks, right? Like
Uh,
flexible cell walls for pressure,
Yeah.
super efficient DNA repair for radiation.
All sorts of incredible adaptations. And understanding those helps us figure out the absolute limits of life as we know it and where else we might find it. Think Europa. Titan.
Mind-bending stuff.
Okay.
Back to space stations, though. There was that huge news from China's Tiangong station, a totally new bacterium.
This is where it gets really interesting, yeah. They found something they named Nielia tiangensis. And the kicker is, it's never been seen on Earth before.
Wow.
It's related to Nielia circulans, which we do know. It's found in soil, can cause wound infections in humans.
Found only inside Tiangong. No wonder Reddit went a bit sci-fi with it. Andromeda strain mentions and all that.
Heh, understandable. But scientifically, it probably points to how unique the environment inside a space station is. Like that researcher, Erica Hartman, said surfaces on a station are stressful for skin bacteria. Cold, not much food.
So it forces them to adapt, change.
Exactly. It's likely an Earth bacterium that evolved, adapted specifically to life inside Tiangong, becoming distinct. Not necessarily alien, but definitely changed by space.
That makes sense. Like evolution in fast forward in a tiny, isolated box. What about other bacteria found up there? The sources mentions Klebsiella and Serratia on the ISS.
Right, both known opportunistic pathogens. The key now is to see if they've changed in space. Are they more dangerous? More resistant? Those are the questions.
We need to understand their space-specific adaptation.
Definitely. And they also found DNA from Mycobacteria and Delphtia in dust on an ISS window. Possibly came from Earth's stratosphere.
Mycobacteria rings a bell. Potential problems there. Difficult infections. Biofilms in water systems.
That's the concern. Some species are tough to treat. Think about finding similar stuff in showerheads on Earth, like Mycobacterium haseacum. And simulated microgravity tests on Mycobacterium marinum showed worrying signs.
What kind of signs?
Their metabolism slowed down, but genes linked to causing disease, virulence genes, they actually ramped up.
So even seemingly harmless microbes might become more of a threat up there.
It's a possibility we have to consider. It's not just which bacteria are present, but how space changes their behavior.
So microgravity, radiation, stress,
Yeah.
it all pushes these microbes.
It seems so. It can influence their virulence, their resistance. There was that experiment with Serratia marcescens and fruit flies.
Right, they became more virulent in simulated microgravity.
Uh-huh. And it's not just the microbes changing. Space affects the astronauts' immune systems, too.
Making them potentially more vulnerable.
It's a factor. We know spaceflight can cause issues like the thymus gland shrinking. That's where key immune cells mature.
So fewer trained defenders.
Kind of, yeah. And changes in how various immune cells respond, like granulocytes, monocytes, NK cells. T lymphocyte activation can be reduced. Even stress hormones, like cortisol kicking in, can affect immunity.
Wow. Okay, so let's try and wrap this deep dive up. What are the big takeaways?
Well, first, space stations aren't sterile. They have diverse microbial communities, much like places on Earth.
But the good news, maybe, is that most bacteria found so far aren't inherently super dangerous compared to their Earth versions, at least not yet.
Not yet, exactly. But the space environment is pushing them to adapt. We see potential for increased toughness, maybe increased pathogenicity, resistance.
And that Nielia tiangensis discovery really hammers home that unique microbial ecosystems can develop up there.
Absolutely. Which is why understanding all this is just vital for astronaut health on long missions. Think Mars.
Definitely. So maybe a final thought for everyone listening. If microbes are adapting this much in ways we're just starting to see, what other biological changes are happening, maybe unseen, in the microbes, in us? As we go further out, what challenges are waiting that we haven't even thought of yet?
That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? It's a whole new frontier, biologically speaking, and we're just scratching the surface.